And I'm talking about just simple project. Imagine what would that be on a very big project. User who just hates your app and he just wants to break everything. And I remember saying to the lead engineer who was interviewing me that hey, I actually just know how to write small projects. Writing this type of code is called writing for humans. Now what PR do we call a good PR? It's exactly like all the great writers read a lot. Hey there, I'm Soumya. Welcome back to this channel. So in this video, I'll be sharing some points that will help you transition from just a guy writing code to a software engineer, which I have realized is a lot more than just writing code. So I started my first software engineering job or internship when I was 19. Lockdown hit. I was unlike other people, I just loved it because, well, it gave me more time to just do whatever I want. I was just learning things, building stuff, and I just thought, why not just start applying for internships? Like, what could go wrong? Somehow I just got hired on the first interview, which obviously made me really nervous because, well, I was just applying. And I remember saying to the lead engineer who was interviewing me that hey, I actually just know how to write small projects on my own, but I have no experience just writing big writing code for big stuff like companies or like whatever you do. And I said this because I was really nervous that, hey, they have hired me, they must be expecting some really hardcore things from me, and what if I will not be able to do that? So I just just to put it out whatever I know, so I just said this. But since then I've interned at 3 places, working on multiple roles. First was a full stack, second was pure React frontend, and third was mobile app, right? So working alongside some really experienced engineers who have been writing code since a lot of time and working on really big projects, I have learned a thing or two about software engineering. So here are some things that will just help you ease that transition from just a guy writing code to a software engineer. The first one would be write code for humans. So I think when we first learn to programming as we are taught, we're taught these rules of programming. For example, name of a variable should always start either with an underscore or an alphabet. And what I think is, just to abide by these rules and to avoid those red errors, as beginners, we just write some code that is just meaningful enough for us to understand, not even in future, but actually in that moment. And I say that because this meme is very true. And you must have gone through this, where you just write some code and you come back to that code after a week or so and you're like, hey, who wrote that code? But as the code base grows and many people get involved in that code base, it's very important to write a code that a human would understand. Meaning anyone who reads the code gets the context of it, irrespective of you being there or not, to make them understand. Writing this type of code is called writing for humans. For example, I found this really good quote from Martin Fowler that any fool can write code that a computer can understand. Good programmers write code that humans can understand. For example, I just made this two snippets. Just these are the same course, the same React code. Both do the same thing. Just take a look at the left guy and the right guy. You will see you're getting more context. Even if you don't know what's anything about the software, you're just getting more context by reading the left code than the right guy. And as beginners, we often write code like the right screenshot, like for example naming page as P, but in big softwares there is no context to that, what P means. For example, like you would not know what is P, but on the left side you could see, hey, that is actual current page, or just you can just see the variable above that. In the right guy, you'll be seeing it's called list, which does not say anything. It just says, okay, it's a list. But if you just see the code on the left side, it says, oh, it has actually referred members list. So the list is actually of members who are referred by someone. So that is called writing code for humans, right? Anyone can just understand it, and that is very important when you work on projects which will involve or involves just many people. Now the second point is testing edge cases before you ship. Earlier, while working on my own projects, I did not care about any good practices, or maybe I did not knew any good practices. It was just learning, building and shipping new things. But I have learned to be aware of this just by not just from senior engineers after I submitted my PR, or they found some fault in it, or after just testing on my own. So what does this mean? This simply means testing the feature or the app that you just built for all the random things that the user could do, and to ensure that it works ideally in every situation. If it is not awesome, you just found a bug and you just have to fix it. And if it does work ideally in every situation, well, then you can just ship your code with confidence. To do this efficiently, after you write some code and you think that okay, this is done, what you should do and what I have learned is that you should just take off that programmer's hat, the guy who just thinks who just built it, and you should just wear a hat of a user who hates your app and he just wants to break everything. And you should just then proceed on doing various things with your app and try to break it. One might think, isn't this the work of testers or quality assurance or whatever? Maybe it is later, but first it's your job to ensure that whatever you have built and shipped is the best, is your best work. But this is just a good idea even for your projects. You just have to check everything, that everything just works ideally. Now the third point is handle those errors. Recently our tech lead said something to me that just made so much sense, and he said something like this, and I quote, basically if you are working on front end, you have to assume the guy who has wrote the backend code is crazy, so write your code such that it handles any error, and obviously vice versa. What he meant to say was that while writing code, always think of how something could just break my code and how could I handle that. So to handle that, you can use things like try catch blocks or finally, or you can show pop-ups or models to user with some cool quirky message. And some advanced way to handle those errors would be using something like error boundary. What error boundary means is that, for example, I have a mobile app and I'm using it, and some screen has a bug and it just breaks. And so what should happen is that my whole app, and to prevent my whole app from crashing, I'll just show the moment I detect that error, I'll show a fallback screen, which means that a screen that will just say, hey, something just broke, we are on it. When the user presses back, the whole app is working fine. Basically the goal is that whenever some part of the app does not work, this should not affect the whole product, because that would be devastating for the product, right? And so this is another way of handling some error. So basically the point is that when you're writing code, just write error resistant code. Anything could happen, but you should be very confident that, hey, my code will not break because I've handled the errors. Now, what PR do we call a good PR? Now I have read this somewhere, and I've also seen it in experience, that a good PR is always small and focused. Now, what is small and focused PR? So for example, I'll tell you what is not a small and focused PR, right? So a PR that is small but not focused would be like lot of bugs, small bug fixes, 1-2 line error changes throughout the app, and you make a PR out of it. So what that would do is that it will just put the reviewer out of context, and it could also affect testing. So that is a small PR because it has very small code changes, but it's just very not focused just throughout the app. Now, the example of a focused PR which is not small would be a very big feature that you have built, which is like lot of code, and you just commit it in one go and you just make a PR out of it. So what that would do is that it would just make things really hard for the reviewer. It would be a very big thing to review, and you know how it's like, just there is a mountain and you just have to climb it in one go. So that's a bad PR, right? So good PR is always small and focused. So just remember this while you are making your next PR. Fourth point, refactoring and resolving technical debt. What is actually a technical debt? If you are into tech, you must have read somewhere or listened that, hey, we have a lot of technical debt. Some big companies have like technical debt and stuff. So what does this mean? So if you Google it, it means that when it comes to software development, technical debt is the idea that certain necessary work gets delayed during the development of a software project in order to hit a deliverable or a deadline. Technical debt is the coding you must do tomorrow because you took a shortcut in order to deliver the software today. Now, technical debt might mean many things on context to different things, but in context of writing code, it basically means writing quick code to get things working, and not caring about good practices. It has its own, so in short term, it has its own advantages that, hey, it gives you, just faster deliverables. Just if you have a deadline, you can just do a lot of coding and just get things done. But if the code is not fixed, the things you're doing quickly is not fixed, and I'll give you an example of that, very simple example. It will become a mess after a point of time, right? And you'll be just thinking like, why did we not do that earlier? So a small example of technical debt would be refactoring code. So an example would be, for example, you're making an app and you're just writing a code, and for example you have a color purple. You have decided, hey, I want to color my theme app, or at many places I'll be using purple as my theme color. So every time you make something that needs purple, you just write, hey, in CSS or wherever, so you just write color as color semicolon or color colon purple or whatever, right? So every time you make something, you just write color purple. So at the end of after 15-20 days, you have 20-30 places or more where you have just colors is purple, right? Now then you just realize, hey, purple is actually really bad, I should use something bright. Let's try orange. Now what you have to do is you have to just search for those 20-50 places, and you have to just change that purple to orange, which sucks, right? And I'm talking about just simple project. Imagine what would that be on a very big project. But what if you had just made a file called constant in a place and named it colors, and in that you just place color primary theme colon is equal to purple, and you just import it and use it everywhere you should use just color colon primary theme, which is coming from that file. So whenever you just have to change a color for testing, you just go to that constants file and just write at one place orange instead of purple. You're done, and that's refactor. So it's a good practice to that whenever you just notice that, hey, this function or this pattern is actually being used a lot of times in our app. What if I could just make a new file out of it and just place it in one place and do some modifications or whatever, and just import it everywhere in our app. Other examples of technical debt would be choice of or language. For example, using JavaScript instead of TypeScript, because obviously JavaScript is a dynamic language. We'll not get into that, but yeah, that is basically technical debt. Just doing something right now to get things done instead of thinking for the future, and that is not good, right? So always think for the future and just do a lot of refactoring and solve that technical debt. Last, a bonus point would be read a lot of good code and start reviewing others' code. What do I mean by that is start reading good code, and by good code I mean code which have good practices written by really good engineers. And if you're wondering, well, where will I find this code, it's just up on GitHub. You can just find a good project with a lot of stars, and there's a lot of chance that it has good code, right? And what that does to you is that next time when you write code, you start imitating the practices and the the things that you have noticed that, hey, that was actually really good, I should try that in my code. It's exactly like all the great writers read a lot, they were great readers. If you work at a place, you can, after some time, after some experience, you can just start volunteering up for reviewing others' code. That would that would help you learn from them, suggest some changes if you don't understand something, and that will make you a solid software engineer over time. So yeah, these are some points I have learned in my journey of these 1 to 2 years of working with people and writing code, and I hope you have learned something out of this. Do let me know in the comments. I really want to know what do you think of this video, because maybe I have made some mistake. You could just point it out, and if you're watching till now, definitely just go down, write a comment. That means a lot. And if you like this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, that means a lot. And I'll see you in the next one. Till then, have a great day and keep building.